Once upon a time, there lived a kind woman named Akinyi. Akinyi had two children, a daughter called Sifa and her little brother Juma. Sifa was known throughout the village for her beauty and kindness, and every maiden admired the attention and love that she received from men and people in general. As the years went by, Sifa's beauty caught the attention of a wealthy merchant named Kazi. He was captivated by her charm and proposed to her, showering her with expensive gifts and money. Sifa, lured by the prospect of a life of luxury, accepted his proposal without hesitation. As Sifa's wedding day approached, Akinyi's heart was filled with a mix of happiness and sadness. She was happy that her daughter had found love and was embarking on a new chapter of her life, but sad that her daughter would no longer live with her. The wedding day finally came, and Sifa and her rich husband Kazi got married in a grand ceremony. After the grand wedding, Sifa moved into Kazi's luxurious mansion, leaving behind her mother Akinyi and her younger brother. As Sifa settled into her new life of wealth and luxury, her heart seemed to grow colder with each passing day. She became consumed by her rich wife's status and became very arrogant. She completely changed from a kind woman to a very cold and mean person. She treated servants in the house like mere objects, and she would insult and overwork them. She completely forgot to check up on her mother and her younger brother. So one day, Akinyi decided to pay a visit to Sifa to find out if she was okay and why she hadn't visited her. Akinyi prepared a traditional dish that was Sifa's favorite and cooked it with so much joy and happiness. With a small bag containing the dish she had prepared, Akinyi arrived at the grand mansion. She politely asked the servants to call her daughter, and with no time Sifa came. Instead of the warm embrace Akinyi had hoped for, she was met with a cold gaze from Sifa. Sifa looked Akinyi up and down with a smirk and said, "Well, look who's here. What brings you to my home, mother?" Akinyi just looked at her, ignoring her unkindness, and said to her, "I have brought you your favorite dish, my dear. I thought we could sit and catch up." Sifa laughed as she threw money at her mother. She told her that she knew her intentions and that she had not come to see her but only wanted to have a share of her wealth. Akinyi's eyes were filled with tears and disappointment as she wondered what her daughter had turned to. She explained to Sifa that she loved her and she had come to see how she was doing and not to collect her money. However, Sifa continued laughing as she removed and gave her mother a bag full of money and chased her mother out of the house. She did not care that there was a scorching sun outside. Akinyi, who was very disappointed, gave her back the bag of money and walked away from Sifa's mansion. As Akinyi was walking under the hot sun, she remembered how much she had struggled to raise Sifa all those years. She remembered how she had worked tirelessly, working multiple jobs and working in people's farms to make ends meet. All the labor and sacrifices she had taken to ensure that Sifa and Juma had enough to eat and wear. She remembered how sometimes she would often go without meals to ensure that Sifa and Juma had enough to eat. And after all those sacrifices, this was how her daughter Sifa had repaid her, with disrespect and treating her like an enemy. Akinyi cried her heart out as she went back to her house, realizing that the love she had once shared with Sifa had been lost forever in the pursuit of wealth and status. Not long after the visit to her daughter, Akinyi fell seriously ill. The villagers gathered around to offer their support, but it was clear that only Sifa held the key to saving her mother's life because of the resources and wealth she had. Only Sifa had the money that the medicine man wanted to treat Akinyi's condition. Juma, who still held his sister in high regard despite her transformation, went to the mansion to deliver the news to Sifa. With a heart pounding with hope, he pleaded for her health, explaining their mother's dire condition and the urgency of the situation. Sifa, whose heart had now turned cold, looked at her brother and coldly dismissed his plea. She said to him, "Last week, your mother came to this house. I gave her money, a bag full of money, but she rejected it and threw the bag of money at me. So no, this game you and your mother are trying to play with me is game ended. I'm giving you nothing." Sifa turned her back on Juma and closed the door, leaving Juma devastated and heartbroken. Days turned into weeks, and Akinyi's condition continued to worsen. Despite the villagers' efforts to gather funds, they fell short of the amount needed for her treatment. Akinyi's once vibrant spirit grew weaker with each passing day, and the body became weaker. Meanwhile, as Akinyi was suffering, Sifa was living her best life and showed no remorse for her bad actions. She refused to acknowledge her mother's pain or the pleas of her younger brother, who had now lost all hope. Tragically, the day arrived when Akinyi's weakened heart could bear no more. She passed away, surrounded by the village that had loved and cherished her. As she took her last breath, she left a curse that her daughter Sifa will never find peace and that she will never experience the joy of being a mother. As the news of her mother's death reached Sifa, she was faced with regret and she realized the magnitude of her actions. She had the ability to save her mother, but because of her heartlessness, she did not. She tried reaching out to Juma to offer him a place to stay, but Juma rejected her offer. He said this to her, "I'd rather die sleeping out in the forest than to live with you." Sifa's world was now filled with sadness and with no peace. Her husband Kazi, who was now tired of waiting for her to get pregnant, chased her out of his house. Sifa was left with no place to go since all the villagers hated her and she had no one to blame but herself for these misfortunes. So, what's the moral lesson? This folktale teaches us that we should not forget where we came from or the people who raised us to be the adults we are now. Anyway guys, that was it for today's folktale, and I hope that you enjoyed and learned something out of it. I hope to see you guys in my next video. Kwaheri!